Noswaith dda a chroeso cynnes i'r trydydd sesiwn yn ein cyfres cyfnos ar weithio tuag at Gymru gwrthhiliol. Welcome to the third in our Twilight series on working towards an anti-racist Wales. You're very welcome. In this evening's event, Sunil Patel, Director of No Boundaries Training and Consultancy, will be discussing the importance of reporting racism and addressing inclusion. He will talk about his own personal experiences, as well as others that he has come across. We'll also hear from David Browne, who's Head of Fitness to Practice here at the EWC, who will talk about the Code of Professional Conduct and Practice and Equality and Diversity. Your microphones and cameras are turned off for today's event, but please use the chat bar throughout the event to ask your question, and the team will collate them for Sunil and David to answer after their presentations. If you lose connection at any time, just rejoin with the original link and you'll be able to come back in. You'll notice also that the event is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube, and this will be available on the EWC website and social channels within the next few weeks. We are using social media as part of today's event, so please do follow us and share our messages. We are at EWC_CAGA, using their hashtags EWC events neu digwyddiadau CAGA. Finally, just to let you know, today's presentation is available to view live either in English or Welsh. And instructions are, if you're using a laptop or computer, click the View Options button at the very top of your screen. Halfway down then, you'll see the shared screen heading with two options underneath. So to view the Welsh presentation, click EWC CAGA, and to view the English presentation, click Sunil Patel or David Browne. If you're using a mobile device or tablet, press the screen to bring up the screen share option, which is usually on the left, top left of your device's screen. To view the Welsh presentation again, click EWC CAGA, or to view the English presentation, click Sunil Patel or David Browne. So we'll repeat those instructions in the chat bar, or you can message one of our team if you're having difficulty, who'll provide assistance. So without further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to our first speaker today, Sunil Patel. Croeso cynnes mawr, Sunil.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Hope you're all well, and thank you for joining us on this Thursday evening, especially if you've probably been in schools, a lot of you throughout the day, and joining us for the next hour. I'm just going to start sharing my slides. Just bear with me a second. And hopefully you can all see my slides, which I'll go through tonight. I was really thinking about what I wanted to kind of put over to yourselves, and a topic which is really dear to myself for various reasons, and probably obvious reasons, I suppose. 6 letters, so much history behind the word racism. And for me, I think I'm in a unique position where actually I'm a parent of 2 young boys, 12 and 15 years of age, in school. I am a member of the Black Asian minority ethnic community as well, so I'm an advocate for that community, and I get plenty of calls on my phone asking for support and help when it comes to children experiencing racism. And I suppose I'm also in a unique position where I've actually led an anti-racism charity, which I'll talk about shortly, for a long time, and supported and visited plenty of schools across Wales, thousands of children, and lots of education staff. So today I was thinking, I wanted to kind of put over absolutely the importance of reporting racism and dealing with racism, but also maybe looking at how schools could progress. And there are lots of schools, by the way, that are doing some excellent work. I will put that out there early to yourselves. There are really, really good examples of schools that we've actually visited that are doing some really, really good work on this topic. I'm just going to move on to a little bit about myself, so you know more about myself here. There's a picture of me at the age of 5. I'm a son of refugee parents who came from Uganda back in 1972. My family all came straight over from Uganda, but my mother went to India, which is where I was actually born. And I was 6 months when I joined the rest of the family with my mum in the UK. We grew up in an area called Southall, in London. I moved to Norfolk and Greenford. I moved to Cardiff in 1981. I can still remember the tears along the M4 as we were in the car, and I didn't know where Cardiff was, or I'd never heard of Cardiff and Wales, not much about Wales, but it's probably the best decision we made because I really love living in Wales and in Cardiff. I went to Fitzallen High School. Before that, I went to Grangetown Primary School. I also spent a year in college as well. Have worked in the public sector for a number of years. A child refugee, became an immigration officer for 5 years, so I'm really proud of my time within the Home Office there. And I established Show Racism and Red Card Charity in 2006. I led it for 15 years until last year, November 2021, where I decided to leave for a different adventure. And I co-founded No Boundaries with a fellow director last year. So it was just over 12 months ago. We've had just our first anniversary, and it's been a pretty busy period for us, that's for sure. I also support independently as a race equality consultant and advisor. And I've recently been joined the Criminal Justice Board in Wales, Independent Scrutiny Panel. I'm a member of the Welsh Government Race Equality Group. I'm activist for racial equality, but probably all equality, generally speaking, and looking to hopefully help support social change in our society. And two children, my boys, are really important for me, Christian and Rohan. And probably what I do now is probably because I want them to have a life where they don't have to tackle or deal with racism like many of us have had to do, sadly, growing up in our society, and many still continue to do in our schools. So No Boundaries was set up basically after the last few years. I really felt I needed to continue to work in race equality, but help support and collaborate with as many people as possible. And our strapline is really trying to make what is really uncomfortable become more comfortable. I'm not going to read the slide, but I'm sure you can see for yourselves what the aims of the work are. In terms of ethnic minorities in Wales, I'm sure you already know, but I just thought I'd share a slide here. So we do understand that Wales has a 3.1 million population, of which there are 5% Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities that live in Wales. 6.5% of them are Welsh speakers, 94% of them are not Welsh speakers. And also the majority of them are based in Cardiff, Newport and Swansea. I would say also the last few years, we have seen diversity increase across all parts of Wales, from Anglesey up north all the way through to West Wales and the middle parts of Wales too. If you've been following the World Cup, you've been following the news, you may have seen Amar Cymru, a supporters group that was set up about a year ago, which I'm part of, who are actually at the World Cup as well right now. And there's been quite a lot of programs around ethnicity and the diverse histories of Black, Asian, multi-ethnic communities in Wales. I think it's really important that we share that we are a multicultural society, and there is some wonderful things happening across our schools now when it comes to curriculum and the changes that have come in. And I just thought it'd be useful just to share the background of these communities with you. Now, I can't see the chat function, but if anyone would like to type away, why do you think these images might be significant to myself? I'll just give it a few seconds and I'll see if anyone types anything in here before I actually share with you what these images mean to me. Okay, some of you may have guessed, some of you are not sure, but these images are really important to myself because every one of these images is my actual experiences of racism in our society. There's a lot more images I could have put on the screen, but I would have needed another couple of slides. But these ones on the left are the ones that are more significant in terms of my experiences. And I'll just share one, which is my first ever experience at the age of 9 on the 30th of October, 1982. I was in the Bob Bank at Cardiff City watching a football match between Cardiff and Portsmouth. There's a match program there. And 10 minutes into the match, myself and my brother, who was with me at the time, who would have been 3 years older, and our friend Jared, also, he would have been about 12 years of age. Sadly, we were spat upon by the fans just behind us. And it was the first time I'd ever come across a word which sadly we still hear now, and it's the P word. It ends with I. And that was the first time I'd ever heard this word, and it left a significant mark, I suppose, and a scar on myself and my brother and Jared, because it was a harrowing experience for us at the age of 9. And it probably put me off going to watch football matches for a number of years. And when I did go and watch football games again, I'd actually wear a cap because I was really afraid of what would happen if after that experience I had had. And even now when I go and watch matches, I'm never 100% comfortable, because as we've seen in the Euros last year, racism sadly is still within the beautiful game. But there has been progress, and we'll keep, I'm sure, moving towards a level playing field in all sport. The other examples, one was in Bristol, which is number 2, Devon Cliffs Holiday Park, and just after the Brexit vote, I experienced racism just outside Cardiff Castle back in 2016. The ones on the right, I suppose you can call them the racial microaggressions that I've had to deal with as well in society. And I won't go into that too much at this stage because I know time is a little bit limited. But I think it's really important just to kind of put this over to yourselves, that you get yourself familiar with racial microaggressions and those everyday racism that happens to people. And for young people, that may well be happening even in the schools, where a pupil may not sit next to someone else, and they may be touching someone's hair, for example, if they've got afro hair. And I've heard all of these stories before in schools where it does happen, and sometimes it can be quite subtle. But sometimes it can be quite overt as well. So it's really important that we understand racial microaggressions can have a real impact on anyone, but especially if you're a young person, you will remember many of the situations that you unfortunately come across and deal with. Now, when I speak to my children, I always say to them, when it comes to education, they are the most important days of your life, and I'm sure you all agree. It will dictate the rest of your life, really, if you do well in education and schools, etc. So for me, I looked at when it comes to the early years, and I remember just after the Brexit vote, when I was with the charity, we used to get schools contact us where young people would use racist language, remarkably, from the age of 4 and 5 years of age. I hadn't seen that prior to Brexit. It was very much year 5 and 6 onwards. But post-Brexit, there has seemed to be a change where younger people are sadly using inappropriate words and language in the early years, as well as in primary schools. Now, I think it's really important that even by the age of 3, young people actually do develop biases. And it's really important that in early year settings and nurseries, even though maybe diversity isn't how it should be when it comes to staffing, there are ways in which we can make sure it is an inclusive environment when it comes to young people seeing people who are different, maybe through images, books, the posters on the walls, and so on. The number of times that I'd ring up primary schools in areas that weren't very diverse, where we'd offer workshops without charging them, and the number of times I would be told, oh, we're not a very diverse area. We don't have many pupils who are from Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities. So we don't actually need support or workshops which look at anti-racism or any support around this topic. For me, I would be frustrated, because even if areas aren't very diverse, it's so important that those areas actually do maybe do more when it comes to inclusivity and tackling teaching anti-racism itself, because young people are going to grow up. Some will go into your universities, which are going to be in diverse areas across many parts of the UK. So it's really important that from an early age, we do set the scene where we look at inclusivity from early year settings through to primary schools. Now, primary schools is obviously where young people sadly do experience some form of bullying. I think recent figures I looked at was around 40–50% of people get bullied in schools. When it comes to primary school, you also have certain challenges when it comes to ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, which I'm sure you're familiar with. I really kind of brought this up because for me, I suffered from adverse childhood experiences myself growing up, but the additional trauma I dealt with was also racism, mainly outside of school. But some young people are dealing with issues outside of school when it comes to what's happening in houses, but also they're dealing with racism maybe on their way to school. Some will deal with racism actually in school. So I wanted to kind of just flag up adverse childhood experiences, because I'm really an advocate for many people who actually work within education or with young people, that they really should be familiar with ACEs, because I think it's really important to understand what they actually mean. When they then move into high schools, okay, we have to consider why is it that certain groups, for example, Black Afro-Caribbean children and Gypsy Traveller children are excluded from schools compared to other children from different ethnicities. when it comes to racism, 4 out of 5 young people from Black, Asian, multi-ethnic communities actually experience racism in schools as well. I remember doing some research probably around about two years ago now, or just before the pandemic, actually. It was in an area which is in South Wales, not a very diverse area, but I actually engaged with about 100 pupils throughout the day, doing various workshops and consultations with them. These children came from 8 different schools across that region. And out of all those children, 83% of them had experienced racism, mainly in school, but some of them outside of school. Now, really what struck me was the amount of racism they received. It was on multiple occasions. And it was quite emotional because I asked them to put their experiences on flip chart paper. And I had 113 different comments and language and words that they were being called in school, sometimes on a regular basis. But what was really difficult for me to comprehend was a lot of them had lost faith really in the support that they didn't feel they would get from teachers and staff within schools as well. Many of them would say to me, oh, well, we just get on with it. It's just normal. We just, we can't do nothing about it. And for me, that really struck a chord where I thought, well, we can't have that. We've got to make sure children are protected, and safeguarding is priority in our schools for sure. But that was something I really distinctly remember. And even I was a bit surprised with the actual percentage of children that had said that they experienced racism in secondary schools in particular. When they get to university, if you're fortunate and you're able to get to university, hopefully you do well and you get a degree. But again, we know that racism does follow you from early years, and it can follow you all the way through to university. And the Equality Human Rights Report in 2019 actually showed the amount of racism within universities is also at levels which really are unacceptable as well. I'm just going to leave the slide here just for a few seconds for you to read in 2022 the headlines we've seen across Wales. The comments on the right-hand side as well, I think, really tell a story and a picture in terms of the struggles not just young people have, but also their parents and family members having to support children who are sadly dealing with racism. And I remember the story around Raheem Bailey, I think it was earlier this year, who sadly lost a finger as well, fleeing bullying and racial harassment in a school in, I think it was in the area of Gwent. And as you can see, it is a real problem for many schools to tackle and deal with. Everyday racism. So when children are maybe outside of school, they may be going home, they may be out with their parents, family members. Sometimes they may be dealing with everyday racism, those microaggressions. And again, I'm not going to read the slides, but you can see for yourselves what I mean by that. I've personally experienced every one of them myself. I remember 2 years ago, I was in PC World in Newport Road looking for a laptop. I was with my partner, my wife, browsing, and I can sense and I can feel that the security guard was just not far off behind us, and I tried to lose him within the aisles, but he kept following us and following us and following us, and I had to eventually turn around and say, look, why are you following us? And that is a very common occurrence for many people who are followed by security guards because they may feel that they're going to be doing something inappropriate. I bring this up because when it comes to young people outside of school, some of them may experience this as well when they are in shops, okay, stereotypes, being stereotyped, and some of them may experience other issues with maybe when they're with their parents. And I have heard of stories of Muslim women in particular who've had their hijabs pulled off their heads, and they're with their children. And it's really traumatic for parents and children to actually come across and to to deal with that. So it's really important that we understand that everyday racism is also an issue in our society, in and outside of school. I also wanted to use this opportunity just to have a think about staff within schools too, and education staff, because racism is not just about young people, it's also about education staff who some may exhibit racial prejudices themselves. And it's up to other staff to ensure that they speak up and speak out. And if it's racism and it's wrong, well, we need to call it out. These are examples. I mean, the one in the middle is actually a message I had from someone on my phone. And as you can read it for yourself, that was something which they felt was happening in a school. The image on the right was a young lady who recently came out talking about her experiences. She's a head teacher in Cardiff, and experiences that she'd had both within working in the school, but also as an education staff member. And in the top, we could see the headline there from North Wales a couple of years ago in Flintshire, where 2 head teachers were using inappropriate language when it came to WhatsApp messages between them. And I remember the article distinctively because I was looking at what the response would be from the council. And I think I was a bit disappointed really with the response. I often wondered what actually happened to these head teachers, you know, in such important positions. You know, what was the actual response to what happened and what they had said? I'm still to this day not quite sure if there was any kind of punishment or anything that happened to them in terms of the way in which they behaved. Now, when we look into increased representation, and we know the figures are very low when it comes to staffing and education in the education sector. I mean, when it comes to head teachers, there are literally, I think it's 6 or 7 head teachers who are from an ethnic minority. There are no head teachers who are from the Black background community. And we look into increased representation. For me, if we look into increased representation, it's got to go hand in hand to ensure that the environment that the schools have are inclusive. You know, we need to ensure teachers behave in the right way. We need to ensure teachers using the right terminology, language. And that's why it's really, really important that teachers, you know, are held to account. And I hope that is the case moving forward, because I don't think it has been the case in previous years. That's my personal view and my personal opinion. And that's based on my own experiences of working with schools and what I've come across in staff rooms myself. But I do believe things have moved on. I do think we are in a different place in the space. I do feel that, you know, we need to continue to educate and support teachers, which is really crucial, and to increase their own confidence as well on how they can support young people experiencing racism and how to tackle it in our schools. I thought I'd just share that one slide there with yourselves. The other thing I wanted to kind of bring up is school policies. I've seen a fair few school policies in recent weeks and months where it seems like they've been copied and pasted from years ago. I think it's really important that schools actually look at their school policies to ensure they are current and they're not in breach of the Equality Act. And I just wanted to bring up the case on the left-hand side from a number of years ago. It was a school in Rhondda and Taff, and they actually ended up paying £172,000 in terms of this court case, which involved a Sikh girl who wore a bangle to school. She was excluded from school because of that. However, they breached her human rights, and under the Equality Act, she was protected because of her faith, and the school lost the case in court. So I just wanted to flag up, if you have got school policies, you know, please do have a look at those policies, you know, making sure that they are not discriminatory. Recently, there was another article which Equality Human Rights Commission put out about discrimination based on Afro hairstyles with young people in schools, and schools who may be asking children to go home or having issues with hairstyles which would be in breach of Equality Act law, again, will get into real trouble and problems for themselves. I wanted to just flag this up because sometimes it's easy to have a policy and not look at the policy for maybe 2 or 3 years. And for me, I think it's really, really important that, you know, schools and local councils as well support schools to ensure that they understand what law and legislation is around uniform and other policies around jewelry, etc., etc. It's been 23 years since Stephen Lawrence inquiry, Macpherson report, 1999, it came out. Stephen Lawrence sadly lost his life in 1993. And I often wonder why are we still waiting on it to be mandatory to record and report racism in our schools. I still, to this day, don't understand why it's not mandatory, it's not law. Hopefully it will be, because I think that would really help support the education sector to actually understand where are we when it comes to racism. Because in years gone by, if we haven't got records of how many incidents are being recorded or reported, then we don't really know the significance of how bad it may well be. And as I mentioned, 4 out of 5 Black, Asian, minority ethnic young people experience racism in our schools. So it actually has been rife, and it continues to be a real problem for many young people. The Welsh Government are now looking at this, and I'm hopeful that this will, you know, really push forward quite quickly and rapidly, because I think it really will help to make the education sector kind of take note and say, look, we need to do more to try and make sure every young child has that opportunity where they can get do their best and get the best education attainments without being racially bullied in our schools. I've got a short video which I'm just going to play, and hopefully it will play on your screens as well. These are two young people who actually have finished school. One of the ex-pupils, sorry, went to a Cardiff school, and one went to a Vale of Glamorgan school. And they're just going to share what their experiences were like.
There's comments around how dark my skin is, even being from South Asia.
It's often the butt of a lot of jokes and, you know, sort of turn the lights off, so or Duke gives a smile or open your eyes.
There's a few things I had with my name, just pronouncing my name wrong, or people not being bothered to learn how to say it properly. You want school to be a welcoming environment, you want it to be inclusive, you want to, you go there to learn and make friends and develop relationships. But if you go there and, these things are said about you, you start to question yourself. And then I start to normalize that this is just something that happens in schools in Wales, and you just go up through that. But you find out when you're older that it shouldn't be like that, and you shouldn't have to put up with any of those comments or experiences just because you think it's normal or just because it happens so often.
I put up with quite a lot of blind racism, which was never malicious, but it was there, and I probably should have, recognised that and did something about it then. Don't get me wrong, I know people can have a laugh and a joke, but it did get a bit wearing. But I never really said anything because I thought that was just the way life is. I think the educational system has a duty to implement teaching about colonialism, teaching about racism and racist attitudes from a younger age, just so children have that opportunity to understand and learn about it, and I guess can recognise it then when within their own lives.
Okay, so those words I used: normalised, something just happens in school. Again, those ex-pupils there mentioned that there. So just have a little think really around what I think we need to do. I think reflection is so important. Taking time to actually understand, where are we as a school? Are we doing enough? Keep learning is so important. Get to know about different various cultures, get to know about different communities, and continue the learning. There's so many resources out there now, TV programs, books to read, and serials and so on various platforms. Open your lens and widen your thought processes, thinking about maybe something that you may not experience or affect you, but maybe putting yourselves in other people's shoes would be really important too. And for me, working collaboratively is really important too. Working with as many partners as possible, and there are some really good partners that are doing some brilliant work within Wales. DARPA is a group which we're part of now, and they've got some brilliant partners doing some wonderful work there as well. It's a real good source of information and support you can get from that group, DARPA. This is a school we've gone into. It's in Gwent. It's a brilliant school, do some brilliant work. Not that much diversity in the school, but they've really pushed forward when it comes to having an inclusive environment. I wanted to mention that because sometimes I don't think schools get recognition, schools that aren't in very diverse areas that are doing brilliant work as well. So I kind of just wanted to point that out for you. In terms of the work No Boundaries does, we do go into schools, we work with young people, we work with education staff, school governors, as well as staff who may not be actually in the classrooms as such, but maybe your dinner ladies, for example, receptionists, and so on, and just have these real honest discussions are linked to racism. And just some feedback I wanted to share with you on the left-hand side, some schools that we've gone into. On the right-hand side is the various workshops that we were able to provide in schools. Yesterday, we did a workshop on the Windrush generation, and recently we did a workshop around South Asian heritage. We do workshops around anti-racism generally, and workshops on immigration and so on as well. Some of the schools that we've supported in the last 12 months, some of you may be on screen today, some of you they might be in your cluster groups, but we've had a really good response from schools across Wales and actually in England as well. And just some of our other key partners that who have supported No Boundaries in the last 12 months as well, on the screen there. And I know my time is up, so I've had a message. So just to say, education is the most powerful weapon. that we can use to change the world, and strongly feel that it's not good enough not to be racist. We need to be anti-racist. And I would say that there really is a sea change. I can feel the momentum growing, and I do feel really positive that we are going to have, you know, a next generation who will be living hopefully a life without discrimination, regardless of their protected characteristics. Thank you for your time. I think my time is actually up, and I'll take any questions after the next presentation.
Except I can't see my camera. Good evening, noswaith everybody. Delighted to be here tonight. Diolch, Sunil, for that part of the presentation. So what I want to do in the second part of the presentation really is to talk about the EWC code and how that links with equality and diversity. And so hopefully there'll be an opportunity to answer some questions at the end as well, along with Sunil. So I'm David Browne, I'm the head of fitness to practice. Just to give you a very brief kind of overview about what I'm going to talk about. Talk about regulating in the public interest in the sense of what we mean by registration of practitioners. I'm going to talk to you about the Code of Professional Conduct and Practice specifically in relation to equality. And then I'm going to try and draw it together in terms of its link with equality and diversity. So just to give you a little bit of context, to say the Education Workforce Council is one of a number of regulators. Some of these will also be familiar to you. For example, the Nursing and Midwifery Council and the General Medical Council are two regulators which have been particularly high profile over the last few years, particularly as they've been trying to introduce and reintroduce new doctors and nurses and things like that to the register. We have a responsibility for regulating the education workforce. So just to give you an idea about the sort of the size of our registration, if you like, we're quite unique in the sense that we register across 7 different categories of people working in the education workforce. So the largest, clearly, school learning support workers and school teachers, but we also regulate across the further education sector, work-based learning practitioners, and also more recently with youth workers and youth support workers. So that just gives you an idea, if you like, about the numbers. So in terms of the code of conduct, what is it? Well, this is something that we are required to do in terms of our legislation. So we have to provide a code of professional conduct and practice for all of our registrants. And we're also required to review that every 3 years to try and make sure that the code is keeping up to date with the profession and any changes within it. So the version which you can see sort of screenshotted on this slide, this is the version which came in on the 1st September of 2022. So having just completed that three-year review, having been through consultation on that. So what is it? Well, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's essentially a document which sets out the key principles of good conduct and practice, and it should guide registrants' judgment and decisions. But in addition, it also informs parents, guardians, and learners and the general public of the standards that they can expect from registrants. And this document is something which is very easy for everybody to be able to see, and you can access it very easily via our website. What can happen if registrants fail to comply with a code? Well, it may call their registration into question. In terms of understanding it, because say the document itself is relatively short, it's only 8 pages, it's fully bilingual, and as I say, it just sets out really the key principles. But what we've tried to do as well is to provide further guidance that will help people to understand it better. So I won't read through all of the bullet points at the bottom there, but essentially every single one of those is one of the guides that we've produced to try and provide additional guidance. In some cases, though, those guidance documents have been drawn out of sort of analysing the types of cases that we've had as part of our fitness to practice function. For example, using social media responsibly was born out of quite a high number of cases that were referred to us by employers to deal with. But I've in particular tried to focus, obviously, for this event in terms of tackling racism, which was a good practice guide that came out just over a year ago. And as I say, it's a very important document in terms of trying to develop what we're talking about tonight, and does build upon some of the key principles that are set out within the code itself. So I'm not going to read through each element of the code of conduct, but what I've tried to do is to take the code. So this particular slide is actually that section of the code printed in full, but I've tried to sort of embolden the areas that I want to sort of return to and focus on when we actually look at the good practice guide itself. So in terms of responsibilities then for registrants, the first one, recognize their personal responsibility as a role model. Conduct relationships with learners and young people professionally and respectfully. By contributing to a fair and inclusive learning environment by addressing discrimination, stereotyping, and bullying. So these are key tenets, if you like, of the code of professional conduct and practice. Personal professional responsibilities for engaging with learners and young people to encourage confidence, empowerment, educational and personal development. Have a duty of care for acting on anything which might put a learner or young person's safety or welfare at risk. Reporting any safeguarding issue or any other issue which may potentially harm a learner or young person's safety or welfare. They're mindful of their professional responsibility for the health, safety and well-being of colleagues and themselves, and they demonstrate a commitment to equality and diversity. So what we want to sort of focus on as we move into the good practice, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by demonstrate a commitment to equality and diversity? Well, the guide that I mentioned earlier in terms of the bullet points is called Good Practice in terms of tackling racism. And it's a guide to support education professionals in identifying and addressing issues of racism in line with the responsibility set out in the code that I've just mentioned to you. It's a means of highlighting the importance of addressing issues of racism and promoting inclusion, equality and diversity in all education workforce settings. So I said, what do we mean by positively influencing equality? So this is a helpful guide. So this is available on our website as well. So what do we say in the guidance? Well, the first thing, create an inclusive environment, promote a whole school, whole organisation approach to create an environment which is inclusive, explores and values diversity, and is robustly anti-racist. And Sunil has given an awful lot of really helpful kind of information about what we mean, and what we're looking at. So educate yourselves as registrants, be aware of and provide accurate information about prejudice narratives so that stereotypes can be confidently challenged. Be aware of employer policies which may apply, for example, equality and diversity policies and anti-bullying policies, etc. So as Sunil said, if you're working in a school or in a college, make sure that you know what the policy is. How would you react if you saw something that you perceive to be potentially racist or discriminatory? Guard against bias. Be aware of the existence of conscious and unconscious bias and how bias can impact decisions and actions and potentially cause discrimination. You'll know what conscious bias is, because that's a very clear kind of opinion born out of somebody's spoken opinions. But unconscious bias, well, what do we mean by that? As I say, we can spend an awful lot of time talking about that, but essentially it's those sort of behaviors, if you like, that are almost automatic and based upon people's sort of subliminal experiences, and sometimes those can be very wrong, so be aware of those. Identify racist behavior. So what sort of behaviors are we talking about? Take responsibility for challenging racism, and it shouldn't fall on those who are the victims. So people shouldn't be in a position to complain that they're the victim. We should be spotting it. This is an important part of what we're trying to develop in terms of the good practice guide and linking back to the code. Act against discrimination, harassment and victimization. What do you mean by that? Well, challenge attitudes and behavior rather than individuals. If people are making inappropriate jokes or they're behaving in an inappropriate way, call them out for it. Be clear that you will not tolerate offensive language or behavior. Don't let those types of behaviors become the norm. Report and record racist incidents. Sunil was saying earlier, wasn't he, that there isn't a statutory requirement to sort of record these things. Well, clearly they are quite important, and working in the schools and the colleges and all the rest of it, teachers and school learning support workers and lecturers and FE learning support workers, etc. They're all there. They can see when these things are happening. call them out, record them, follow the code, take action. If you witness or receive any report of racist incident or bullying, follow up on them. I say really important factors, you know, in terms of dealing with that. So obviously I've gone through those very quickly now, really, to try and link, if you like, the code of professional conduct with the good practice guides. So I think now that we could probably take questions.
Perfect. Thanks, David, and thanks again to Sunil. We do have a couple of questions for you both. The first one is, do you have any tips for supporting students who tell us they're experiencing racism in our schools?
I think for me, it's definitely to make sure you talk to. Oh, am I on? Sorry, I was on mute a second. So it is absolutely crucial that they do speak to the lecturers or staff within school settings, and like we just talked about, and the wonderful presentation just now from David was there. You know, there is a responsibility for education staff to deal with safeguarding issues, and we have to remember that. It's easier said than done for students, I suppose, and like I shared the experience of young people who were a bit tired of it and didn't know what to do because no one was helping them. I think we have to ensure that, you know, we continue to say, look, you know, this isn't something you should be taking on yourself. You need to ensure you talk to somebody within the setting and the environment. And I think for me, it's about making sure we get the message out as well publicly. Say, look, you know, there are organizations that you can go to for support if you don't feel you're getting the right support from the school. You know, and I know that Ethnic Youth Support Team recently have set up a staff member or two that is helping schools and parents when it comes to issues around racism. So they're doing a lot of work with, in collaboration with schools as well, to ensure that, you know, they get the support they need as well. So I think we have to continue to say, look, you have to speak up, speak out. But it's not just for victims. I think it's for others around them too. You know, other students to say as well. And I've seen that in schools anyhow, where young people are really empowered, that they want to say, they want to make sure that the you know, schools are dealing and tackling with racism. And I think for me, my advice would definitely be, well, keep at it and keep at it and keep at it until something, you know, positive happens, because you can't just deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. What Sunil said is really good advice. But if you're actually a student, teacher, perhaps, and you've been placed in a school, the key thing is you should have a mentor who you're working with. If you have any concerns, you should be reporting it to them. If you have a mentor at the college, you should be explaining to them that you've seen things in a school which have caused you particular concern. And it may well be that if you speak to a mentor in a school, their perspective may be different to yours. So, you know, as I say, the key thing is record it, write it down, explain what you've seen, and don't be scared to report it back either to your mentor in the school that you're in, or to your sort of mentor who you'd be working with at the college and probably would have arranged the placement in the first place. But if there were key issues that were being reported back to the education establishments, I'm sure that they would be following up on that themselves, or at least I'd like to think so.
Great, thanks both. The next question then, this is such an important and emotive topic. As teachers, we just want to make sure that we are doing, what we are doing is effective and appropriate. Does the EWC have any further support or training on offer to help?
So I missed a lot past the question there, Jarina. Sorry, could you repeat
that's okay.
that?
Yeah, does the EWC have any further support or training on offer to help? I think that may be around understanding the core, David, or something around anti-racist training.
So in terms of the training we provide to schools, we provide a number of sort of different types of training. We do a general one about the code of professional conduct, and we also do what we call a hybrid session, which deals with social media. But one of the reasons I was particularly interested in coming in to do this session tonight with Sunil is actually, I think this is a really interesting area where perhaps we should be developing some extra training, because what it does is it answers that very question, you know, what do you mean by trying to promote you know, equality and things like that. So in terms of equalities, I would say that our training at the moment doesn't cover that. but I think it's something that we will have to do, and I'm sure you know, if Hayden you know, or Liz or no, Beth's on the call as well, they'll be saying, yeah, we must do that. So that's something that we could look at, and I imagine we could do that quite quickly.
Great, thanks David. And also just a reminder that this is the third in our Twilight sessions, and the recording for the other training sessions are still available on the EWC website. The next question then, what support groups are available for practitioners who are experiencing racism in their workplace and feel unsupported or unheard?
What a great question. And I mean, for me, if staff are in unions, for example, teaching unions should be there to support them. You know, there is a group which has been set up in Wales linked to DARPA. It's called the BAME Ed group, which I think is really good as well, where teachers from ethnic minorities are actually on this group, where I think they meet maybe every week or every 2 weeks. And it's a really good place and a safe space where you can get that support between other colleagues. But I think I do think that we are missing something, if I'm honest with you, in Wales, where there should be somewhere where you can get that emotional support and well-being support for teachers, especially when it comes to racism. You know, some of the teachers from ethnic minorities may well have experienced racism throughout their lives too. And I know that I actually really suffered from racial trauma after George Floyd for about 2 weeks. I really suffered in terms of my mental health because it triggered memories for me. So for me, I think it's really important that there has to be a recognition that if you're increasing representation of ethnic minority staff, we need to make sure that there is support for them, but also all staff as well, generally, because, you know, other staff could be affected by this too. So I think there is a gap, but I think unions are maybe you know, somewhere where they should be going, and unions should be there to support with the setup that they have. But yeah, I'm not sure if David has any other suggestions, but for me, I think BAME-led would be a good one to look at as well in Wales. Yeah,
absolutely, and as you say, the trade unions as well should be effective places to go to, and it may well be though that people are working in you know, education settings where perhaps there isn't an active union, which might make it a little bit more difficult for them. But nevertheless, they should be able to contact, you know, regional offices or what have you to get further assistance and advice and all the rest of it. But I think beyond that, I think you know, where you said, Sunil, is probably one of the best places, because they probably will be very strong advocates, and you know, in terms of taking it forward pretty robustly, I hope.
Thanks both. Just to add in there, I know that the BAME-Ed network run weekly sessions. I think they're called Time to Talk group meetings, where you can go along and discuss any issues that you have. So definitely check those out. The next question then, you both mentioned training for staff and students. Do you offer anything for parents and the wider school community?
No Boundaries does, absolutely. We're not just working in the education sector. We actually work across various sectors. So we've been working with the prison service, we've been working with the police forces, sports sector. We have worked with school governors, we have done sessions with parents too. But the way I look at it as well is everyone we work with in terms of adults across all of these other organizations that we support and work with, they're all parents too. They're all relatives. They're all uncles, aunties as well, and grandparents and so on. So my view is if we can get the message out to as many people as we can and educate them about what is the correct terminology, for example, and what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, how, you know, how to support people when they experience racism and so on, it'll have a ripple effect, hopefully, and it will have a ripple effect where other family members and friends will hopefully get educated by people that we support. And when it comes to young people, I have to say that I'm coming across schools where young people are actually educating, when they've got home, parents about what they've learned in school. And there are some excellent schools doing some really, really good work as well. I have to say that, and I've come across a fair few of them. So when we do our No Boundary sessions, you know, we do what we do for the day with the pupils, and we're hearing then young people have gone back home and have actually educated, to say, their parents and grandparents about what's right and what's not. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And you know, like Sunil says, we also do an awful lot of training, work with governing bodies, and obviously governing bodies tend to be made up largely of parents, and obviously we work with the staff as well, and certainly that the message hopefully is getting through very clearly that, you know, there is a code, there are standards of behaviour, we expect our registrants to behave in accordance with the code, and where they don't, we will challenge it, because that is a very important part in terms of our role, you know, as regulating in the public interest. So you know, all of those things are really important. But in terms of direct contact with parents, much of our information is on our website. We now have put sort of more videos up which will talk about things like the professional code, and the code, which I mentioned as part of my presentation, is there for everybody to see, and it's not written in, you know, really complicated language, and that's one of the reasons we try to set it so that anybody should be able to quite clearly see what standards of behaviour are expected from our registrants. But the role model one and challenging, that those are clearly in there as well. So certainly going back to about racist behaviour, where it's seen that there's more than enough, I would suggest, for, you know, those issues to be dealt with, you know, pretty robustly, I would say.
Great, thanks both. And the last question this evening, do you have any tips on how to manage the parents when they do not recognise the microaggressions, language or banter? We have had cases where we call to account a child, but their parents cannot recognise the behaviour as racist. Any tips?
Call no boundaries. It's a difficult one, and I've come across that consistently, where schools have done what they had to do, and they're doing great in terms of educating young people, and then when the school bell rings at 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, they've gone back home, and parents are not quite seeing that what they're saying or the behavior, you know, is racist. And when schools have got the parents in to discuss it with them, they're still in denial. It's not easy, and I know for me, as for Director of No Boundaries, I think for us, we really want to continue to try and work with as many parents as possible. But I think it's just trying to reinforce and to say, look, this is unacceptable. I think it's important that schools have the policy which says what is unacceptable, and racism should be in there, and, you know, banter, as we call it, and terminology. If we've got that set in stone within the policies, and we remind the community that this is all unacceptable, then I think parents, you know, don't necessarily have a leg to stand on when they you know, a lot of parents actually know that it's wrong. And that's the thing, is that's what we need to try and get to those parents, to educate them and say, you know, it's wrong, you may not admit it, but that's why No Boundaries is here, to have those difficult discussions and conversations, because I feel that if we can get to the parents and get them to see a different way, and to get them to critically think about some of the views and that they might hold, and then we can start changing and influencing. But I'm still really, I'm really positive about young people. And as I say, they themselves are educating parents, and there are things that schools can do, you know, do work around anti-racism with competitions and plays, for example, and get children to get involved, and then maybe bring parents in to watch the plays, which if it's linked to anti-racism, you know, what better way to educate adults by actually getting young people to do a play on anti-racism and you know, and so on. So I don't have a straightforward answer, because I think it's not as straightforward. I think it's quite complex in terms of, you know, because they are adults, and, you know, it's difficult to change some people's views, and when you are at that age, I suppose. So maybe not the answer you're looking for tonight, but I think you know, it is something which we want to do, is to see, you know, work with parents as much as possible.
I say from the fitness to practice perspective, at least, all we can do is provide a code which is clear. It can place hopefully guidelines which will help people to behave in a way which recognise the importance of diversity and encouraging equality, and hopefully if that can be done at school level or college level or what have you, then that will follow through, and those parents will have come through a system which has been built around making sure that the settings make sure that everyone is treated equally, that everybody is given an opportunity to give of their best. And maybe in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, those parents who we're having difficulty with potentially now will have come through that fairer system, through that system which is more willing to accept the strengths, if you like, of diversity. So that's probably not the answer you would want either. But I think that would be our involvement, because clearly we don't regulate parents, we regulate registrants, if you like.
Brilliant. Thank you both. That's all that we've got time for in terms of questions this evening. But I'd just like to say thank you again to Sunil and David for your very informative presentations. And also thank you to everyone that joined us this evening. We'd love to know what you thought of the event. You can provide feedback now using the link that's been posted in the chat. And we'll also email you out a link to provide your feedback as well. Like the other Twilight sessions that we've done, the recording from this event will be available to watch back on our website early in the new year. So if you keep an eye on our social media channels and on our website for the news of its release. On the topic of socials, we've got an all new Facebook page. So you can follow our latest news and events on our Facebook page, and that's facebook.com/CGAEWC. And finally, we are delighted to announce that the registration is open for our 2023 Professionally Speaking event with world-renowned education expert Michael Fullen. Tickets are available for free via our website, but please sign up quickly because they are flying out fast. Thank you all again for attending. Diolch yn fawr iawn, and we look forward to welcome you to our next event. Nos da.
Nos da.